Hi and welcome, my name is Lawrence Baker and this video is going to be about creating chrome text using layer styles. Out of all the metallic layer styles you can use, chrome is the most difficult to get right or the easiest to get wrong, and it's the size of the bevel which will have the most impact. I'm going to start from scratch, so in other words I'm going to right click on FX and clear the layer style. I've got this style saved so I'm not worried. So double clicking on the layer, but don't click on the thumbnail or the name, will bring up the layer style dialog box. Now sometimes even Adobe will say layer effect or layer style, so it's either or. Under blending options I keep the fill opacity at 0. It doesn't matter at the end, but whilst you're creating the effect it helps you to visualize things better. So the first port of call is Bevel and Emboss. I'm going to reset to default, and these are Photoshop defaults. Style of inner bevel, technique of smooth. The depth, I'm going to play around with that, but before I play around with it, despite resetting to default, it's remembered my angle and altitude from the previous setting. So what I will tell you now is make sure it's on 90 and 16 and tick global light. We're going to use a drop shadow, so when we get down there we have to be careful, but tick global light for now. So make sure you see the top edge of that highlighted like that. So when I bring the depth up, this is the strength of the shading. If you mouse over you should see that come up actually. There, set the strength of the shading. So around 200 to 500 usually works, and I'm not going to play around with it too much at the moment because I know it doesn't have a huge impact on the end result. You do need to have something, but not too much or too little. Size, we'll come to direction in a minute. Size, look in that box there, but you can also look in the window now. That is a huge impact, and I would say around 18 we're not far from where we ought to be. The trouble with this chrome effect, this size will have a massive impact. Now if the text is much smaller or the font is much smaller, you'll have to have a much smaller size. So this will have a huge impact. If you've got very small text, you obviously wouldn't put a chrome effect on it, but be aware I'm on 500 pixels for size at the moment, so that has a huge impact. I'm on 18 pixels for the size of the bevel. I often soften it by a few pixels. It's just out of habit normally. I don't know why I do it, but I do. And it does, if you've got a very hard edge, it does help it along. Right, angle, we said 90 degrees and 16 for altitude. So the light's shining straight on. So if I move that around, it's coming from the top right there, so to speak. If I move that around, it's coming from the top left. And that's what up and down means. Now it's coming from the bottom right, and I normally have it on 90. Only for this chrome effect, that is. And then altitude is 16. The reason the altitude, I always keep it between sort of 10 and let's say 60, is the angle of the light. So think of a billboard with a light on it. If it was on 0, it means the actual light is on the sidewalk pointing to the bottom of the billboard. If you bring it up 16 degrees, you'll bring it up like that. If you bring it to 90, it's pointing in the sky. So 90, I'll put it in there. You know it's not going to work. Same with 0, it's not going to work. So you need it above 10 at least, but 16 works for most of this chrome effect. So the next thing is the gloss contour. Now this puts a shine on the bevel. So this is really important. I know what works, it's ring. The reason I know it's called ring, if I click here you'll see it's called ring. I can change the contour, quite advanced stuff, but I don't need to. There are other settings. This one coming up now is double ring, and you can see it works, but not brilliantly, but ring works really well. Now, when you get confident, you'll play around with this, but in the short term, leave it like this. Now, highlight mode, screen and white, that blending mode of screen, means no matter what, it's going to make it white, because screen and white together will always affect what's below, always. Multiply and black will always make things darker. But I want to make them slightly more brighter and darker, so shift and up arrow to get to 80%. Same for the shadow mode, 1, 2, 3, up to 80%. Because for Chrome, you need that extra oomph, you know, it's very sort of bright and dark, if you see what I mean. So that really helps it along. Now, I don't think you need to do much more here now. I would stay with that, and if you need to come back, we'll come back. Now, contour is the shape of the bevel, so how the light is traveling across that bevel. So on linear here, it's not going to do anything at all, basically. On ring, it really works. So I'm keeping on ring. So I know this is pretty safe. I could try other ones like that. But for now, keep it on ring. Right. The next one is gradient overlay. Again, I'm going to reset it to default. What you need to do is come to the end of the gradient slider here, click it, or click the drop down arrow, click on the cog, go to metals, which I've already done, go to OK, pick silver, and you'll be absolutely fine. Change linear to reflected, keep align with layer ticked, keep it on 90. If you've got any problems, reset alignment and it will always line it back up in place. Now, if you've got low scale, you'll see all these lines there. That's what scale does. If you want to get really nerdy, you can come to blending options, untick transparency shapes layer. You can see the gradient in its full glory here. You can move it around and play around with the scale. It's just to show you how it works. Simple as that. I find reflected works really well, and I find it needs a line with layer on. So that I always keep ticked. Sometimes with other effects or other gradients, I don't have a line with layer ticked. Back to blending options, back to transparency shapes layer, tick it. So we know what we've got here. So I might make that scale a little bit larger so it sort of blends it off a little bit. If it's like that, you can see what we had. And I'm going to reset the alignment as well. So reset alignment is like the rescue button. So if you've gone like this and changed it all over the place, if you come to reset alignment, you've got it back. That scale is fine, that's fine. The next one is drop shadow. Do I need a lot of drop shadow? By the way, you can also drag the drop shadow around. You need a little bit to help it along. It's just giving the effect a little bit of oomph. I might spread it out a little bit. No, I might bring it in and make it a bit sharper. I'm just going to play around with it a little bit more. So dragging around can be more problematic than playing around with the sliders sometimes, so be aware of that. You don't need to play with anything else here. Now, if I had global light ticked and I'd move that around, I'll show you something now. I've got global light ticked, it's on 90. So I forget it's also ticked in Bevel Emboss. If I move it around, I'm also changing the chrome effect. Come back to Bevel Emboss. You can see it's -4. So I need to put that onto 90, which would change the shadow back as well. So you can see the relationship is like synchronizes across. So be careful of it. If you play around, you've got it ticked and you play around this drop shadow, you're not affecting the Bevel Emboss. So it might be safe. I've also affected it yet there again, but what I would do is come here and change it to 90. And then maybe I should untick it. That's why I mentioned tick it at the beginning. It's just to show you what can go wrong. So I'm going to put it back to 90 here. Just type in 90, but it won't affect because I unticked it, the actual bevel one. It's also there on the inner shadow as well, which we can't see at the moment. So does that look okay? I'm just moving it around. I think that looks fine. Turning the drop shadow on and off, just, you know, it just gives it a little bit of extra oomph, for want of a better word. If I want to save this style now, new style, give it a name for, put this pen down, I'm on a Wacom tablet, style, just like that, anything will do. Include the layer effects, which are these styles here, but they call them effects there. So it is bizarre. Include the layer blending options, which are the blending options here, full opacity on 0, which I don't need on 0 now, by the way. Once you finish the effect, it's just to help you assemble the effect. So that's that done. Just keep it ticked. It does no harm. Add to my current library. That's my Creative Cloud library. I'm going to go OK. Go OK. Go to my libraries for video styles there. So click on my Chrome. That's my original one. That's the one I've just done. So it never looks exactly the same. I can guarantee the reason being is if I come back to my layers, double click on the layer, come to the bevel and emboss, the size makes a massive amount of difference. So as I bring it up, it starts to look like that a little bit, and the depth does as well, of course, but not a massive amount. So that's what really makes a lot of difference, that size there. Be very aware of it. That looks pretty full on. I also know what's making a difference because I know from experience. If I double click here, go to contour and bring the range down a little bit, it's probably because the range was quite high as well on that one. So if we go OK, you can see it looks like that. It looks almost like the original one which I had there. So that's it, guys. That's Chrome text. Very easy to get wrong. Watch out for that size of that bevel and the range across the contour as well. It is finicky Chrome to get right, and it doesn't look as good as gold or silver, etc. But it is okay with layer styles. There are other methods, but for layer styles, which is quick, and you can download my style and start from that point and play around with it anyway. That's it, guys. Thanks very much.